So within the part environment, we can create patterns. And you can see from the 3D model tab, there's actually 4 types. I can do rectangular, circular, sketch patterns, and then mirror. So mirror is counted as a sketch or a feature pattern. Now, in some more recent, Autodesk moved the feature pattern over to the modern palette approach. And what we can see here is that if I start rectangular, if I start circular, if I start the sketch pattern option, notice the same look and feel. So we get the palette with the collapsible sections within it. Now notice that with the toolbar, I can also switch from rectangular to circular and sketch driven. So regardless of which button you select in the ribbon, you can switch between the different types right from the toolbar as well. What I can also do is I can switch between selecting solids. So if I was doing a multi-body, multi-solid part, I could actually pattern solids, or I can switch to features. Now this is kind of the next step. So it's now defaulting to selecting my input geometry. I'm going to select that hole, which I could select in the drawing canvas, or I could do so by selecting the feature in the browser. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the first direction, and I'm going to use one of the world axes. So notice I can pick X, Y, or Z. In this case, I want the X axis, but it's going the wrong direction, so I'm just going to flip it. And instead of 2 of them, what I'd like to have is 3. And what it's showing me right now is that there's going to be a distance of 10 millimeters between occurrences. Now with circular features, it's actually going from center to center. So I can see that there's going to be 10 millimeters from the center of the first hole to the center of the next hole. Now for direction 2, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick an existing edge. So what you can do is you can pick an existing edge, you can pick an axis, and you're setting the direction that you want those occurrences to go in. Again, it's going in the wrong direction, so let's flip it. And right now what I can see is that it's using this incremental. So it's going 10 millimeters between occurrences. I'm going to change this to total. So what I want 10 meters total, but I'd like to have 4 occurrences. So now I'm asking Inventor to do the math and figure out. So what there is 10 millimeters from the center of the first hole to the center of the last hole. And then I'm going to have it distribute those evenly between them. So I just changed that to 4. Now let's click OK. So it's created the pattern. We can see that it added pattern into the browser. Now let's go back. Let's change that original hole. So let's go change that hole. Let's drop the size of the hole. Let's make this 1.5 millimeters. And let's make it countersunk. Now that's a bit big on the countersunk. So I'm just going to change this to 2.5. And I'm going to click OK. And notice that all the occurrences within the pattern updated automatically. I can also go at any time and I can modify the pattern. So perhaps what we'd like is, this should have only been 8 millimeters between instances. And for direction B here, what I'd like is I changed my mind. This really only should be 3, and I'd like to have only 8 millimeters. So now that I've changed the settings, I'm going to click OK, and we can see that that pattern has been updated. Okay, switching over to a different model here, let's do a circular pattern, which would be called a polar array in AutoCAD. And again, defaulting to selecting the object, so I'm going to select that hole. And what's looking for now is it's looking for the direction, but with circular patterns, it's looking for the axes. It's looking for the center of rotation. What is it going to rotate those features about? Now, again, notice that I could select one of the origin axes. Now, in this case, you can see that those origin axes aren't quite lining up the way I need it to be. So let's just go and let's select this curved surface. So we snap to the center of that surface. In this case, what I'd like to have is 7 instances. We're going to have it fitted. So we're going to use we're going to use the fitted option here. We're going to make it 360 degrees. But do note that I could change this and say, well, I'd like to have 15 degrees between instances. But the fitted is what we want because we want it fitted within 360 degrees. And I'm going to click OK. Now, what if I was to go and I was to add on something to one of these features? So let's say that we were to apply a chamfer to the backside. So I click OK. And notice that it didn't get applied to all of the holes in that pattern for a couple of reasons. One, we can see that history-wise, the chamfer actually happens after the pattern, so there's no way Inventor would ever include it. So let's take that chamfer and let's drag that above. Now, just because I moved it above doesn't mean that Inventor knows that it should include it with the pattern. So let's go and let's modify our pattern. Let's go to our input geometry and let's add on that chamfer. So just to highlight that we can actually add or remove geometry from our patterns after they've been created. Okay, well, I'm going to suppress the whole. So let's just right click on in the browser. Let's pick suppress features, which in this case also suppress the pattern because the pattern can't exist without those features. Let's just roll the end of part marker down, and I've got this embossed text. So let's do a circular pattern. Again, we'll select the feature. I'm going to select the circular face, and let's put 12 of these. Now, right now, notice that it's using the rotational option. So when I click OK, let's look at the front face. What I can see, I guess we can't quite see. Let's rotate this a little bit. Let's actually change our view here. Shade with edges. And notice that what it did is it took that one, and notice that as it's patterning the feature, it's also rotating the occurrence. Now, if I go take that pattern and I make a change to it, and let's change this to fixed, notice in this case that it's still patterning the features, but they're remaining fixed in orientation. So they're remaining, in this case, horizontally aligned to that original. Now, if you're not quite happy with how it's being positioned, what you can do is when you're using the fixed option is you can actually change the base point to get those located the way you want them to be. Now let's stick with the rotational option. Okay, now that's rectangular, that's circular. Let's go back to the original part. And I want to highlight that another option with these two is that you can actually create, and let's just collapse a couple of these panels, is that you can create irregular style patterns. So let's stick with direction A here. Let's actually increase this to 4. And I'm going to say, well, the default spacing is only going to be 5 millimeters, which is okay. What I'd like to have is on this row is I'd actually like to have this be 6. So now is how it's updated just that particular row. I'm going to click add again, and I'm going to pick these two. And for these two, I'd actually like to have 8 millimeters. So what we can see is that the default set to 5. So it's going to be 5 between occurrences by default. But I was able to add that second one, make it 6. And then the next two was able to make it 4. Let's drop this down to 3. And notice how we can change and apply that irregularity to it. Well, in direction B, I also would like to do an irregular pattern just on the middle row, and we're going to make that 3. So it's not going to be evenly distributed. And we'll click OK, and notice that that pattern has updated. Now, sticking with rectangular patterns, something that's not discoverable, but I'm going to do a rectangular pattern. I'm going to select this counterbore hole, and for my direction, I'm going to pick this spline. So you can actually pick non-linear, non-straight objects to use as the direction. As we'll have 5 along that. I can ask it to fit it. So maybe instead of having 1 per in between each occurrence, is we want to fit this, and I'm going to fit this to the curve length. So now we can see how it's going to distribute it. I'll click OK, and notice that that pattern was created along that selected curve. Now, if I go and modify the original sketch, so let's take this curve, let's change it. We'll click Finish. Notice that the pattern updates to match. If I go back and change the number of occurrences, let's say, or the spacing in between, we'll click OK. We can see the pattern is updated. So it's not discoverable. It's not discoverable that I can go and select a curve to pattern along, but it's something that you can do. I also want to highlight with the rectangular pattern is that the edges don't have to be perpendicular. Let's change our view here. Let's change our view so we can see the edges. And I'm going to do a rectangular pattern, this particular feature. And I'm going to pick my first direction to be this bottom edge. And let's flip it and let's put 3 of them and we'll just change the spacing a bit. And what I'm going to do is let's rotate this a bit. Let's pick our second direction. And notice that we can pick this edge. So let's just look at it from the front and notice that it's using that non-perpendicular direction to pattern about. So again, we'll change this to 3. We'll drop the spacing. So now we're happy with that. And I'm going to click OK to create that pattern. In fact, you can use the same direction. Now let's do a rectangular pattern on this hole. I'm going to pick the x-axis. What I'd like to do though, is I'd like this to be in the midpoint. So I'm going to select middle. Let's change this to 5. Let's drop the spacing so we can see what's happening here. And notice now it's using this one to be in the middle and it's going to go in both directions. So we'll click OK, and we can see it's now created that pattern with that one in the middle. Okay, I'm going to make a change to this part, and I'm going to apply a draft to this part. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to draft this bottom face. Let's say 10 directions, and we'll flip it. So click OK, and let's put that, to add that extrusion back. And because this is a through extrusion, so we can see it's a through extrusion, is we know that it's going to go right through the part. Now let's apply a rectangular pattern. So select that feature. Let's go, oops, changed the wrong one. I actually wanted to change the occurrences, not the distance. Pick that axis again, let's flip it. And I'm going to click OK. Now notice that the creation method is identical, so we'll click OK. And we can see is that it's not actually going through. If I was to change the view and we were to make the view wireframe and we were looking at this from it, what we can see is that it did an identical copy of it. Now this leads to the best performance, because instead of having to recalculate each occurrence in the pattern, Inventor just kind of takes that as a blob and just copies it. Now in this case, this is obviously not the results that we wanted. So let's go and let's modify that pattern. And I'm going to switch this from identical. I'm going to switch this to adjust, and I'm going to click OK. And what we'll see now is that notice the feature, each occurrence now adjusts to recompute, recalculate to go through. So because that feature is a through all, it then recalculates, readjusts each one to go through the part. So again, that was in the pattern option, and you can see the creation method. Most cases, you're going to want to use optimized, but in some cases, you're going to want to change that to adjust because of instances like this. Okay, so going back to the original, let's delete our pattern. And what if I had a situation where I have a bunch of holes that I need to create on here, but there's really no regularity to it? So I'm going to go and I'm going to roll this back, and I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm just going to add some points. So I'm going to add some sketch points here. Normally I would dimension these and locate these, but I just want to highlight another feature. Let's bring that hole back. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a sketch pattern. So sketch driven pattern. Again, here's my feature. And what it's done is it's gone through and selected all the points because I used hole points there. I used those point centers. Now let's go back to our sketch and let's add in a line. And let's go through and let's create that again. Gone through and selected all those point centers. But notice that I can't select anything else. So the whole feature would allow me to select the ends of that line, but this feature doesn't. What it has to be is they have to be sketch points. So what's done is it's gone through and selected all those sketch points. I'm going to click OK and notice that it's patterned them to all those points. Now, obviously, if I go back to that and I was to delete, a point, maybe move a point to a different location, we can see that the pattern updates to match. So that's a sketch-driven pattern. It's that you can take any feature and then pattern it amongst a bunch of sketch points. Okay, well, let's delete that pattern. Let's delete that sketch. And we'll stick with our hole. And I'm going to start a sketch on this face. And I'm going to add in a rectangle. So I'm going to add in a rectangle. And let's just put on a couple dimensions. And I'm going to click Finish. Now what I want to do is I want to create a pattern, and I want it to fit within this boundary. So I'm going to do a rectangular pattern, and it works with all three types. Select our direction. We'll flip it. Let's say that we want 5 of them. We want 5 in between. Pick our second direction. Again, we'll flip it. Perhaps in this case, I want 4, and I want 4 in between. And I'm going to go into the extents, and I'm going to select a face or profile to select as the boundary. Now, what I could also do is I could append an offset, so inside or outside that boundary. So I could say, let's say a 1 millimeter offset to make it just a little bit smaller. In this case, I don't need that, so I'm just going to delete that. And notice that right now what it's doing is it's doing include geometry fully encased by it. Whereas if I was to say this way, it's going to include any that are fully enclosed or crossed by it. Or what I can do is I can include which geometry whose base point is in between. So some options there about the inclusion. And we can see this if I was to apply an offset, which ones it's going to exclude or exclude. So if I was to create it right now, it's only going to include these 6 because these occurrences are the only ones that are completely contained within the boundary. But if I move to the second option, what it's going to do is now going to include these because now they're included or essentially crossed by the boundary. So we'll click OK, and we can see the pattern that it's created. So that's the feature pattern command, how you can create rectangular, circular, and sketch-driven patterns, how you can make them irregular, how you can apply boundaries, how you can work with directions. And it's a powerful tool for creating repeated features as opposed to creating them manually one at a time.